evening and welcome to our program, Jones and Company. I'm your host, Christian Jones, and on this special edition of Jones and Company, we speak with our JCN Person of the Year. Now, last week we spoke with the principals of our JCN Civil Society Awards Business of the Year. This week we're speaking with our Person of the Year, and it's none other than Sir Franklyn Wilson. Sir Franklyn, congratulations and welcome to Jones and Company.
Firstly, thank you so very much. But if I might, let me say that it gives me so much joy just being here with a second generation person. You know, your father interviewed me any number of times. Now to be being interviewed by you. I want the Bahamian public watching this, and anyone watching this, to realize the greatness, this is what we need. This is how we're going to build the country. This is what it takes. The next generation. And you know, I came here. I asked you, no paper. You're doing it, and you're doing it world class. And so, also, allow me to begin by saying, keep it up. This is exactly the type of things that the country needs.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you for those accolades, and it really is humbling, especially when you're sitting across from a great Bahamian, one that has forged, a legendary career, not only in business, in philanthropy, one who we can look at as being an example for Black Bahamians everywhere and throughout history, as somebody who saw within our country the need to pioneer into various different enterprises and to, at the same time, assist in creating the Bahamas and the opportunities for the youth that many of us enjoy today. You know, we look back on junior achievement, a movement that you pioneered in the country. We look back even to the decision that you would have made in the late 1960s after graduating Dalhousie to return to the country, the fact that you believed so much in a young, bustling nation, or at least the availability and opportunity for us to move in that direction. In terms of being a member of Parliament, I believe between 1972 and 77,
Yes.
In terms of that era of Bahamian history and the role that you played. You know, one of my father's other good friends, George Smith, who I had the opportunity to develop a close friendship with before he passed. I remember on the eve of the 2021 general election, he was speaking about what he assumed would have been the Progressive Liberal Party's victory on that day. And he looked at me, and I was just back from law school then, and he was saying, young Mr. Jones, it is a very interesting time to be young.
Yeah.
And as we sit here, and we're mirrored here in terms of age and experience and youth, and some would say vigor, it is interesting definitely to be able to have this opportunity to sit here with you. So thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. Let me let me say this to you. The late George Smith was right. But young people there's some serious realities that young people have to face. And those of us who are more senior citizens have got to really do all we can to help. Things have changed so much. Things have changed so much since I would have been your age. But we've got to search for answers, and we can't give up.
Right. When you would have graduated from Dalhousie, qualifying as a professional accountant, and at the time there probably wouldn't have been more than half a dozen or so professional accountants, and you made the decision to return to the Bahamas. Now, at this point in the country, we probably have thousands of professional accountants that have moved beyond even working in accounting firms. They work in law firms. They work throughout the financial services industry. When we think about the role and the influence that you would have played in that regard, and how you and your contemporaries of the time were able to build that profession to what it is now. Looking back on it then, and the decision to return home then, could you reflect on that?
Well, let me say this. Firstly, the decision to return home, that's the one I just mentioned earlier about things have changed so much.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, for people of my generation, the idea of returning home was a given. I mean, that was an obligation.
Right.
And it's interesting, that was in an obligation that was grounded on race. Because the late John Morley, for example, was a friend of mine. And John spoke of when he went away to college. He also had that same obligation. As a matter of fact, John tells me he remembered someone a little older than him who, when they were going off to university, people in the community would say, boy, why do you think you're going to do that? Why are you going to waste his time talking about going to college? I mean, what I'm saying to you is that wasn't that long ago in the Bahamas.
Right.
Okay? My father, Godfrey, who you would know very well, he helped me get a photograph of my father because he knew that my father went to Tuskegee University.
Right.
I didn't have a photograph of my father. My father died when I was still in my teens. I really wanted this photograph, and Godfrey used a lot of influence and so on and so forth. And he was able to get me a photograph of my father the day he entered Tuskegee University. And when you look at it then, he was 22 when he entered Tuskegee. See, like today now, people go into school, to college, at a young age.
Right.
But the point I'm making is the idea of coming home was what you did. This reality that a lot of Bahamians now, they go away and they're being encouraged by their parents and grandparents. Right. The idea of why come back here? And I'd like to, discourage that thought as much as I can. And I think it's for all of us to do what we can to continue to create opportunities so that people do not have that sense that they cannot return home.
Right. And you talk about it as an obligation, and we talk about, a generation of pioneers who coming home as qualifying as professionals in various different disciplines and being able to use their skills professionally, not only to create a living for themselves, not only to prove that within this country that the black man or woman was capable of doing these things, but also because of an inner desire to be a part of the building of this nation. When we, I suppose, compare that time and then, do we see within the youth of the nation that they have that desire to come home and be a part of it? Are they, in your estimation, are they dealing with frustrations of?
I think this, Mr. Jones. The desire to help and contribute, I think, remains and is strong. Okay? But there are a number of things that are difficult. I mean, the people want to work. I mean, you go where you study, you think you're qualified, you think you're capable, and so on and so forth. But young people have to understand education by itself is it's useful, but you have to turn it into something. It's not an entitlement. It's not a passport. Okay.
Right.
So the fact of the matter is that people have the desire. In my humble opinion, there have been a number of ways in which public policy has had a very disruptive effect on that. Okay. know, the most recent one, if I went backwards, I, I, I really think that gambling is emerging as a serious pathway to poverty for a growing number of people.
Right.
Just like I think a generation before, consumer bad personal choices around consumer credit. There's nothing wrong with consumer credit. There's nothing wrong with a lot of things you do, but it's like in everything else, you've got to do it with degrees of moderation and thought and reasonableness and so on and so forth.
Right.
And a lot of people make a lot of bad choices.
Right.
So when you look at a lot of areas of our national life, you see a lot of people making a lot of bad choices. And that is making it difficult for a lot of young people to do all they would like to do and really wish they had an opportunity to do. So it's not easy, but we have the finances.
Right. Looking back on your career and what has led you to where you are now, and obviously I'm sure along the way you had in many cases the mentorship of various different people, of the father of the nation to some degree and some extent. Could you look back on it and say that you always made the right decision? Are there any decisions throughout your career that perhaps you would have regretted along the way? What has been the driving force in those cases, perhaps where there have been disappointments, so to speak?
Well,
because you have a lot of people who I believe also are discouraged from time to time.
You see, the fact of the matter is, yes, things don't always work out the way you want. I'll give a very practical example. When I started doing the project in Illustra in 1985, I never dreamt in 2024 I still would have not done anywhere near what we envisaged doing. See, everything ain't always whatever you want to think.
Right.
The story of Job is in the Bible for a reason. 39 years we've been doing that project on Illustra. 39 years. But I've not given up. I'm not giving up. So if anyone's looking at this and want to see something, don't give up so quick. I tell the story about the 7-Up. You think the guy stood up and said, I'm going to start a drink called 7-Up? Why not 1-Up, 2-Up, 3-Up, 4-Up, 5-Up? What I'm saying to you is, Muhammad Ali, I got a quote from him the other day. He says, look, in boxing, you don't lose if you get knocked down. You only lose if you stay down.
Right.
So the fact you get knocked down don't mean you got to stop. So the point I'm making to you is, yes, in the course of my career, I have had many, many things not worked out. But I'll tell you something. For those who are looking for this, I say to them, people say work hard. Yes, work hard. But I also add to it, pray as you work. Pray as you work. Because at the end of the day, I don't care how good you are, I don't care how many strengths you have, I don't care whatever you got going for yourself, at the end of the day, it comes from God.
Right.
It comes from God. So if you got to pray, and you got to do more than just work. You got to work and pray.
Right.
So in my case, for example, look, I had a career in politics. The fact of the matter is, I exited politics twice. I exited politics in 1977 when I had a difference with the then leader of the Progressive Liberal Party. And so to me, I walked away from it. I walked away from it. And, I look back and look what the Lord did. I had to close one door to go through other doors. 25 years later, I ran again. And I thank God Chicago Lang beat me. I thank God. Because it did not take me long when I started the campaign in 1997 to realize how much the country had changed.
Right.
And so much so that I wasn't enjoying it.
Right.
I really didn't campaign hard. I'm not looking for excuses for why I didn't win. But the fact of the matter is, I wasn't enjoying it.
Right.
And so I thank God that I did not win in 1997 because the Lord opened other doors. The point I'm making is you work, you pray as you work. And I just mentioned the political arena because I've had the experiences twice. But in every part of my life, I mentioned just now the Illustra project. Folks, I'm telling you, the Lord didn't do it for us in 39 years going on now, but I think some very, very serious things are going to unfold in Illustra. And I want to stay around long enough to see it. I think we're going to make Jack's Bay the Bahamas destination of choice for the most discerning. I believe that South Illustra is in for a period of tremendous growth and activity. And I believe my colleagues and I now, Tommy Turnquest is the Chief Executive Officer, he's working very hard.
Right.
We've got a great team. And I think some incredible things are going to unfold at South Illustra.
Right. As a theme so far in this conversation, Mr. Wilson, we've been talking about your preoccupation with national development, with building the country, with contributing towards the commonwealth of this nation, so to speak. And we've been talking about that being something that's chiefly in your wheelhouse of concern. Some would say a driving force that develops or assists in that zeal you have to wake up every morning and to achieve something else, to carry the bar a bit higher. When we look at politics and perhaps the reasons why people enter into politics today, it seems as if in many cases it's just those who want some sort of career advancement. I spoke to somebody in the political field in that sphere recently who said that a lot of candidates that were fielded in the last election, they've come to the conclusion that these people just needed jobs now.
Well, unfortunately, the record is pretty clear. Unfortunately, that has become what has happened. Thank God it's not everyone.
Right.
But you look around for a lot of people, and politics is a pathway. It's a job. And this is where you look at some people on both sides of the political divide, particularly since we've started this rotating governments thing.
Right.
They get elected, they're a big shot for 5 years, and they spend the next 5 years trying to get back because they've nothing else to do.
Right.
I mean, if you just look around and look at the number of former politicians today, what do? I just mentioned Tommy Turnquest, for example. Tommy is a former politician. I tell him all the time, I believe if he lives, has the good fortune of living long like his father continues, and if he have a path like that, there'd be a whole generation of people who never even realized he was a politician.
Right.
Because he's found another niche. He's doing something. He's making a major contribution.
Right.
You look around at how many former cabinet ministers we have around here today, and what are they doing? They got nothing to do other than working hard to get back, or whatever the case it is, or whatever. It's not good.
Right.
It's not good.
So we must change this revolving door approach to going in for, I suppose, the ego's sake, and coming out with nothing absolutely to show for it. You have people at the same time who believe that there is some sort of pathway to success and wealth, and we have to disabuse people of that. We have to return to almost that driving force that would have led people who were in that majority rule era or in that independence era to strive to accomplish something not for oneself but for the nation. And you know, John F. Kennedy has that quote: "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." I think, Mr. Wilson, this goes back to what you said about public policy earlier, that in terms of the policies that we have passed in terms of entitlements for people, and we discuss this all the time on Issues of the Day as well as Jones and Combe, that yes, to a certain degree, that politicians, or the state rather, should stand in the gap and assist people who fall below the poverty line, or who are victim to what we consider to be, I suppose, this lack of security in our country. But how far do we go? We're at the point now where politicians are braiding hair and cutting hair before people go to school, and some would argue in the country that with all of the entitlements, with the expansion of the welfare net, we've made people lazy to some degree. We've taken that zeal away.
Let me put it this way. I understand the point, but you see, helping people. I mean, that's a Christian concept at its root.
It is.
That's a Christian concept, or it's a concept consistent with Christianity. But there are aspects to that. There's a thought about, you know, teach the man to fish, as opposed to giving him a fish. Politicians, for example, this idea of, like you mentioned, people, you know, how they give, whatever the case it is. To me, I think there's a serious aspect to that. Where are they getting the money from to do these things?
Right.
See, when the politicians do this, where's that money coming from? I personally believe, and it's worthy of consideration, I don't know it for a fact, but there's something called a constituency fund. Now, is that being used for those purposes? Was that the intent? Was that more doing things of a different... In other words, what I'm saying to you is, the government, as I understand it, gives every member of parliament so much money in there for constituency works. But as I understand it, there's no accountability to it.
Right.
You don't have to give them a report as to what you did with the money. So, you know, I think that's a matter that is worthy of attention. What are these people doing with the money?
Right. I agree to you, and we ought to ask for more accountability in that era. You know, cabinet ministers, I speak to some of them, cabinet ministers, members of parliament on the opposition side, on the government side, and there are many of them that believe that that is the easiest way for a rogue politician to misappropriate funds, that there's no accountability, or little accountability, I should say, in the system. And I like what you said about charity being at its basis a Christian thing, because I think to myself about the socialism reflected in society and how that can't be Christian, how the church, or there should not be church leaders calling on the government to do more in terms of entitlement. When we think about, you know, this JCN Civil Society Award and what it has meant and stood for over the past 24 years, and you've been awarded Businessman of the Year before, but on this specific occasion, for the year 2024, you are a Person of the Year because of your philanthropic activities. And there have been many causes, all of them good causes in the country, many of them that you have generously devoted or generously donated to, some of them attaching your name to, but a mounting multitude of them not, just giving for giving's sake, to civic organizations, to churches, to church bodies, to maybe even different organs of state in terms of the stories that I've heard. And the idea behind these awards was to select a person to highlight, to award, to goad the rest of the country into also sharing similar characteristics.
Well, you know something, you make a point. You make a point about certain actions being intended to encourage others.
Right.
you know, my wife and I remember one time we did something, and it was a church matter. And our clear instructions was this was anonymous. This was we had no desire to for this to become a public thing.
Right.
Well, the then bishop, I won't call his name, but in introducing his remarks, referenced it, and he called my name and my wife's name and so on and so forth. And then he went on to say, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson said it was anonymous, but he asked the Lord's forgiveness for breaching that request. And he went on to say he did it precisely because he wanted others to say, go now and do likewise.
Right.
And reference the story of the widow's mite on the basis that you may not have to do the same quantum, but you could do something. And it's interesting, I tell that story for one single reason. When we were walking out of the church, there was a lady right in front of us, and she said, reference what the bishop had said, and she said, since they did this, I really got to think about whether I could do a little more. That was the point. There was one person who heard the sermon and was walking out of that church with that concept in mind. So leaders always have this challenge of what you seek, how you seek to use whatever information you have. And for people who try to do as best they could, you don't necessarily do stuff looking for any reward, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes people use it in ways that is helpful to the cause. And what do you do?
Right.
You shouldn't just stop because you tell them, don't say nothing. As a matter of fact, I tell you something. If you look at the greatest stories in Bahamian history in a lot of ways, Malo Butler, the first time I heard Malo Butler's name, it was in the context of how he used to go to the hospital and give people in the hospital money.
Right.
Well, I don't believe Malo Butler would have gone to the hospital, gave people money, and then go to the road and talk it. I don't think that.
No.
What happens is, in my experience, Bahamians talk these things because it's their way of saying thanks. It's not, there's no purpose beyond that,
Right.
And so those are my views.
Right. And that's exactly the point I was getting to in terms of the story you gave of the bishop and the reason as to why he broke that vow of anonymity, to goad other people into doing the same thing, into taking it upon themselves to be more helpful in society, and not necessarily with a view to being recognized for such, but just because, as we've been talking about so far, because of that obligation to do something, to assist in some way. But Mr. Wilson, Sir Franklyn, we have to take this first break on our program, Jones and Company, and we'll be right back.